Day 2 officially in the books from Media Row in New Orleans, and there's a growing overall excitement about the silver and black. We'll tell you about that plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for February 5th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Definitely appreciate you as always. If you're checking us out wherever you find your favorite podcast, or if you're checking us out on the YouTube page, we appreciate both. The show continues to grow each and every day. I tell you that each and every day we're over 17,000 subscriptions, and that's because of you, Raider Nation, and because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes on the YouTube page. Without that, it ain't happening, right? Without Ari, we have no YouTube page. So we big ups to my man Ari. If you appreciate the YouTube page, you appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well at your boy Q254. And the guy sitting beside me, if you're watching on YouTube or just listening, as you have been all week long, hopefully, is Ryan Hogue, former Raiders wide receiver. And you can check him out on Twitter as well at Ryan Scott Hogue. Has done a fantastic job all week long, not only on the podcast, but on a Radio Row, Media Row, I should call it, here in New Orleans. And it's been a lot of fun. So, of course, we're going to recap another day. We got also Thomas Dimitroff, a former GM. We talked to him on Media Row, former GM of the Falcons, came through the Patriots organization. He had some really good stuff to say about the Raiders, John Spytek, also head coach Pete Carroll. You'll hear that conversation coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. But myself and Ryan will break down the latest transactions, what the Raiders made official on Tuesday, and also just the overall excitement that we're hearing on Radio Row from many different people, national, local, whatever the case may be. We'll do that in segment number 2, again, of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. We'll get into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Ryan, here we go, man. Day 2 is officially in the books. We've been running around crazy. It feels like it's day 22, but only day 2 is wrapped up. So how has everything been going? You've talked to a lot of people, made a lot of connections. Just how has everything been going so far for you?
Well, first and foremost, we're still getting along, and we've been together about every waking hour for the last about 60 hours, so that's impressive.
Yes.
I'm having a ton of fun still. I mean, obviously it is very tiring, and I talked a little bit about it yesterday, how interesting it is to do it from this side, right? Normally I'm the one that's getting plucked and pulled and this and that, and so for me to be on this side, I am still a little uncomfortable just cold calling or just going up to people that I don't know, because I think there's so much more value, especially when they're getting pulled in so many different directions, of can you make it personal? Can you have some sort of connection? And you'll see if you listen to our show, Raider Nation Radio, that, you know, the people that I'm having interviewed are I have some sort of connection. Maybe we played together, or we had teammates together, or, you know, we're in the same draft class, whatever it might be, because I remember being on this side, the other side of it, getting pulled, and the ones that resonated with me were be like, oh yeah, I do remember that. Actually, it would be fun to pick you, as opposed to, like, you know, somebody in Tulsa, Oklahoma that's just like, hey, can we have you on? And again, I would love to be on everyone, but you just don't have the time. So how can you make it personal?
No, there's no doubt. And it's funny just, you know, seeing the way that you've made a bunch of different connections with guys that, you know, we've talked to, and you either knew them because they covered a team that you were on. They're a Minnesota native, or they're with the Raiders, like when you talked to Rich Gannon, and he remembered when you were, you know, drafted, your rookie year and everything that you guys went through in training camp. And as a matter of fact, you had a really good conversation with Rich Gannon. We're not going to play it here on the show today, but you had an overall takeaway from Rich about really accountability. You had a really good story, but overall accountability, and how he was even saying that that's so important for the Raiders moving forward.
And the difference between having a culture of accountability by the players versus the coaches. Because, you know, I mean, obviously you have to listen to your coach.
Right.
You don't have to listen to your peers, but it means more. And I know as a coach, you know, even at just the high school level, and the coaching I did, and I coached at the college level as well, but I'll just take it, you know, as elementary as it seems, but the high school coaching that I did, right, my best teams were always the ones that it was less about what I was telling the team. It was more about them holding each other accountable, player-only meetings and things like that. That is the thing that you and I were asking, like, did the Raiders at all this year, I mean, during a 10-game losing streak, did they have one player-only meaning.
You used to say that all the time about when we'd go into the locker room following the game, and you're like, yeah, I like the answers that they're giving, but there's not one guy that you see when you look around the locker room that was angry, that was throwing his helmet, that was saying it stops now.
Yeah, despondent is what I saw, but I didn't see like just fuming, angry. Some people might be embarrassed because they had a bad game, but truly like mad, like this, stops now.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. And that was really, really frustrating to me because if I lose to you, not that I would, in any of these games here.
Hey, shots
Bags,
fired, man.
But I'm going to get mad if I lose in Connect 4 to a young child. Like I'm mad, and I'm like, let's run that back right now.
Wait, hold on. When I lost in the underhand little not ping pong, the little bing bag toss into the washing machine, and then even the football game, and I said, "Oh, let's run it back." You said, "No." I can't get a run back.
I can't. I said, you can't have
See how he does me, Raider Nation. See how he does me. He said he'd be mad if a child beat him in Connect 4, and he'd say run it back. But your boy tries to get him to run it back in basically it was cornhole, but we were throwing it into a washing machine. All right,
it was promoting Tide.
I know, but I'm throwing a beanbag into a washing machine, and I can't even run it back because I didn't get.
Hey, first of all. You weren't even in the JV, man. You went 0 and I made every single one.
Did I make one?
No.
Oh, I'm just
no, you quick, short memory, obviously, but no.
I'm selective memory.
Maybe if you would have made one, I would have been like, all right, he's worthy. But no, man,
it wasn't worthy. But no, I mean, going back to the real conversation about the Raiders and what they weren't doing in the locker room, and now with the new leadership, new coaches. Obviously, Tom Brady, and that he's a guy that if he lost in Connect 4 to a kid, he'd want to run it back.
That when I assess wide receivers in particular, I remember Laquan Treadwell, right out of Ole Miss, was a first-round draft pick to the Minnesota Vikings, and I watched his first rookie minicamp, and I watched him drop a ball, I watched him fall on a route, and kind of jog back to the huddle like that was accepted.
Yeah.
And I remember Paul Allen, who's kind of a famous play-by-play guy for K-Fan.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, why? Tell me why. I was like, that's not the dude. And he's like, wait, what? What do you see? What do you see? And I think back to the time I played with Randy Moss. Mm-hmm. And when I played with Randy Moss, he could run the perfect route against Antoine Winfield, who was one of the premier corners in the league. He could make him fall in practice. And the ball just barely overthrown or underthrown or whatever, and he would immediately run to the front of the room. Mm-hmm. I mean, the front of the line and say, I'm running that. I got to go back. Yeah. Even if it was if it was Marcus Robinson, it didn't matter. He was just like, sorry, I'm taking my turn again because we didn't complete it.
Right.
He did everything perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's why he's got a gold jacket.
Well,
that's why he's got a gold jacket. I know. Raider Nation is not the biggest Randy Moss fans, but the fact is the fact, right? And there's a reason why he's a Hall of Famer, and so you've got to have those work ethics. You've got to have that accountability, that self-accountability.
Self-accountability.
Yeah.
And when I interviewed Rich, the two people he saw, kind of mentioned were Robert Spillane and Max Crosby, right? Obviously, Spillane is his deal's up, so we got to figure out that. But the thing I countered with is I agree with both of those. Whether or not they're super vocal, that I don't know because I wasn't behind the scenes like Rich was.
Right.
But he didn't name an offensive player.
Not one.
And then I said, okay, if you ask 10 in the know Rich Gannons of the Raiders organization, they would give you 8 different answers of who the offensive vocal leader is.
Right.
And he responded with, and when it's not the quarterback, that's problem number 1.
Yeah. And we all know that he was very vocal. Right,
Ooh.
We'd see him on the sidelines getting fired up and challenging coach, but it was challenging in a respectful way because he wanted everything done correctly and done at a high level, and that's why he turned into a league MVP. And it's still, the Raiders haven't had a quarterback since him like that, right? I mean, obviously they had a lot of years with Derek Carr, but they never had play at that level where it was actually MVP worthy. So, and as he won the MVP,
I saw a quarterback cuss out a coach once in my career, and that happened to be Rich Gannon, who happened to be an MVP.
Right.
I didn't play with any other MVPs. I mean, I'm not saying that that's a prerequisite to be, because I don't think Patrick Mahomes is necessarily cussing out Andy Reid.
Right.
But, I mean, there's something to be said about that, just that internal drive and that understanding of the standard is the standard. How many times, I'm going to beat a dead horse by saying that over and over again. And what has been our standard with the Raiders, We're trying to figure that out. It's supposed to be a standard of just win, baby, and things like that. It's been just lose, baby, lately because over the last 21 years, I think we've lost the most games. I think we're tied with Cleveland for most losses over the past 21 years. It needs to change. I think we have the structure now in place. Now the fun part comes for SpyTech, for Brady, for Carroll, for our coordinators, right? To just pluck and play, right? Okay, well, yep, I really liked what he did. Yeah, Jacorian Bennett, yeah, I like him. I'm always gonna pump him.
Yeah.
Our tight end room is our most solid spot. Okay, where's our weakest? Maybe the receiver, maybe the quarterback room. Probably a receiver, just because from just a top to bottom, we need more, right? And yeah, that's the fun part of the job.
No, it really is. It really is. And there's a lot of new faces in the Raiders organization. There's obviously some very familiar faces that are returning. We've talked about them and documented them well. We'll tell you about the latest one that became official, or actually a new addition that became official and a new addition to the front office. We'll do that and talk about what we're hearing here on Radio Row from many different people about the Raiders and the expectations for what they have moving forward 2025 and beyond. We'll do that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of the great sponsors here on the show, and that is Gametime. If you're looking for tickets to the next big event, maybe the tickets to the game that's going on here on Sunday, maybe it's a concert, a comedy show, whatever event it is. Matter of fact, all those events take place here in this city that is New Orleans. Fantastic city. Been having a great time since we've been here. Maybe you need to find that right ticket. Gametime Picks can help you find them right now. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. All you got to do is basically let them know what you're looking for. Bada boom, bada bing, they've got you. Concerts, comedy shows, sporting events, it doesn't matter. They've got the super deals, prime seats. They've got the views on the app, so you actually see where you're sitting. So it's not a guesstimation. You actually see what it looks like from those seats. So it's no surprise when you arrive at the spot. Ready to make your next event even better? I know you are. Download the Gametime app, create the account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, the promo code is LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Game time. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Just kind of gave you a rundown and just kind of overview of what it feels like on day 2 as that's got wrapped up here on Media Row in New Orleans at the Convention Center, getting ready for Super Bowl 59. I did want to go ahead and pass this on that the Raiders made Chip Kelly as offensive coordinator official. They put out the email, so that's when you know it's official, when you get the email in saying, hey, we've hired Chip Kelly as the OC. We've known for days. We've known ever since Sunday, but they officially put that out on Tuesday. So for anyone who said, well, it's not done until it's done, which I understand because we've seen things change, right?
Cohen.
Yeah, I mean, look, we saw Cliff Kingsbury a year ago, right? I remember being in the barbershop when I got the notification. Nope, never mind. He's not going to be. Yeah, exactly. He's not going to be the OC. So Chip Kelly, done deal records. He's good to go. He is the offensive coordinator. Also, Mark Thews, and I had to find out exactly how to say his name. I found out rhyme with shoes.
Hey,
so I'll never forget that.
And I know you like your shoes.
Man, you ain't lying. So Mark Thews has been named the Senior Vice President of Football Operations and Strategy of the Raiders. He enters his 23rd season in the league. He joins the Raiders after spending the last 16 years with the Denver Broncos. Ew. Most recently served as the Broncos Vice President of Football Operations and Compliance from 2020 to 2024 after serving as the team's Director of Team Administration from 2012 to 2019. So what does that mean? What does any of that I just said means? Well, basically, he's going to overlook strategic planning, salary cap, compliance with league rules, and looking over player personnel and more. Again, spent 16 years with the Denver Broncos. So there you go. Not bad.
Well,
it's a nice resume.
It is. I guess the reason I hit the pause button a little bit is because, like, if that was his job in Denver, I think of what happened with Russell Wilson. Like, that was a.
Yeah, they ate that, right? I mean, they ate that money and just to make them go away.
Right, but I mean, player personnel, strategic planning, salary. I mean,
yeah. Well, and he's been there 16 years, so he's gone through many different coaches.
Yeah, he was there with Peyton. He was there with a lot of guys.
Yeah.
I think that to me was what separated Tampa these last 5 years from every other team, and I don't know how much. I don't know who was in that position. I thought Spytek had a lot of
Well, he worked with Spytek in Denver. That's what I do know. So Spytek worked with him in Denver, and Champ Kelly, as a matter of fact, assistant GM, worked with them as well in Denver. So maybe there's some kind of, cohesiveness. Maybe there's some kind of,
synergy.
Synergy is the word. That's a Ryan Hogue word, synergy.
Well, it goes back to, I think we had this conversation, unless I had a dream about it, which I wouldn't be shocked because it's been all football. But, when I said you were creating a blank slate, and it was your station to kind of start over.
Yeah.
You're picking guys that either you're currently working with, have worked with in the past, or have admired, regardless of your relationship with them. And even if it's, you're talking to a person. 12 years ago in Waco, Texas, I was I did a podcast for a day with that person. They're like acting like you're their best friend. Well, guess what? Relationships matter.
Yeah.
And that cohesion, that synergy, all are impactful.
There's absolutely no doubt about it, and so that's we'll see how that plays a part or plays a role, but it's something to be said. And again, the Raiders are doing everything they can to put the right people and the people that they trust to be smart people in the position, whether that's the GM John Spytek, whether that's the head coach Pete Carroll, defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, bringing him back, Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator, obviously Tom Brady. And that's one of the big themes that we had, and I really wanted to get into that here in this segment, is that one of the big themes we've had so far on Media Row is how the Tom Brady effect is real, and a lot of people that might not even necessarily, I don't want to say support the Raiders, but think that the Raiders are a real deal as a organization, are excited about the opportunity, because the work's not done, the work's just getting started, but the opportunity with the people in place to get this thing moving.
Well, Tom Brady is a brand, and it's a championship.
I'm learning this even more now.
It's a championship brand that everybody, when he was playing, just the way he went up to a guy like me, he would come up to, he never did because I never was in the locker room with him, but he would come up and be like, "Hi, my name's Tom Brady," right? And treated everybody like equals in understanding that everybody's looking at him. And it's kind of the Michael Jordan effect. When Michael Jordan walked by LeBron and all those guys, everybody talked about it was like the greatest 100 players, and everybody got quiet when MJ. Same thing with TB12. Right? I mean, it was just he's an aura, and everybody assimilate. It's just they gravitate towards greatness.
Yeah.
And how cool is that we get to experience greatness on a daily basis at the highest level in a puppet mastery form. And
it's funny. I've been very kind of, I don't want to say hesitant, but maybe that is the right word. Hesitant to, just say that TB12 is going to be great at helping put his thumbprint on this organization and getting it back to where it needs to be. But again, and you're here, and that's why I'm glad you're here with me, is that everyone that we've talked to really believes that because of his drive and he does everything great. Like he just won't stop until he gets it right. It is going to drive him to help this organization get back on track. That is what has really driven a lot of people to be excited here.
Well, name a quarterback that played at a high level, won a Super Bowl championship, and then went into the front office and created a championship culture. There's one that I can think of.
And that's who you thinking of?
John Elway.
But he struggled a little bit, though.
But, I mean, he won a championship, though. He brought Peyton Manning in. And why did Peyton Manning go?
Right,
because
John Elway was
John
there.
Elway,
yeah, that's
right?
true, yeah.
And so I think Tom Brady saw that and said, that those relationships that, people gravitated towards John Elway because, I don't think Peyton goes unless he has a conversation being like, hey, we're going to kind of give you the keys. From a quarterback standpoint, you understand, in order to make it happen, right, you have to give, some latitude to you have to be able to have some power. Right. And a good GM understands that. And I think Brady, of all people, will understand because I think he went in Spytek. We were talking to who were we talking to today? That said that exact same thing. After they had lost to the Bears.
Yeah, we were
Adam
talking
Wright. Yeah. After they had lost to the Bears, he went to Spytek and was just like, here's how an organization is going to win. Here's how our organization is going to win. I need this. I need this. I need this.
Yep.
And unless you played that position and kind of understand, as a quarterback that owns the offense and is the figurehead, they're the number one mouthpiece, and they need to be, and they understand what it takes to, especially, when you have 6 rings prior to his 7th, he's going to understand it. John Elway understood it. and whether or not, you consider it a success in Denver as Denver fans or this and that,
right.
At the end of the day, he got it done.
Yeah, they did win a Lombardi. There's no doubt.
And I'm sure Tom Brady sees that and it's like, you know what? I can do better.
Right. Of course. I mean, he's got that competitive drive, which, guys like him are always going to have that competitive drive and want to be the best at everything. And, the other thing that was, very evident on Radio Row, and again, it's only 2 days in, is the fact that, John Spytek had so much respect around the league. Like everybody we talked to, not even knowing if they know John Spytek and his resume, like, oh man, that's a home run. That's a great hire. Like everyone is fired up.
It's about time
him.
Is the thing I heard. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it was his time.
Yep.
It was overdue.
Yep.
Like that's what you keep hearing.
Yes, exactly. So we'll actually hear a little bit more about John Spytek. We'll hear more about the task that's in front of him with Pete Carroll, with Chip Kelly, with this organization, and of course with TB12. We'll do that coming up in segment number 3 when you hear the conversation we had from Radio Row with former GM Thomas Dimitroff. He was there with the Falcons and came up through the Patriots organization. He gives us, it's not going to be the whole conversation because we went about 15 or 16 minutes, but you'll get the steak part of it, not the steak and the sides, but you'll get the steak part of the conversation all about the silver and black coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that is PrizePicks. And as you know, we're in New Orleans for a reason, the big game. It's almost here. There's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks. That's the best place for daily fantasy sports with over 10 million members and billions with a B in winnings awarded. PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. So here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections. And if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game. Yeah, free. If it ain't free, it ain't me. Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that win with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out just like that. It's so simple. Download the app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast alongside former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hogue. I'm Q Myers, and do appreciate all the shout-outs that we've got for Ryan and everything he's provided to the show all week long. Man, he's been fantastic. There's a reason why he's been on my show on the radio all season long. He's been such a great addition, and clearly, as I've seen a lot of feedback from you, Raider Nation, been a great addition to the podcast this week. But, Ryan, we had an opportunity to catch up with Thomas Dimitroff, former NFL GM. And, he and we'll hear some of the conversation, but one, he obviously comes from the Patriots organization, and that's success. But one of the big things that you wanted to talk to him about was really, kind of putting his own thumbprint on the organization, or how he felt when he left the Patriots and went to the Falcons. What was really like your biggest thought when you knew that we had Thomas to talk to?
Well, first of all, I love the fact that he kind of built his way up from like an international scout to a regional scout to a national scout to like the scouting director, all with the same team after he got his international kind of feet wet in the Patriots. And what I wanted to know was, all right, so you then became the GM at 40 years old. Like, do you just kind of do a carbon copy of what was happening in the Patriots because they're the best dynasty we've ever seen in football?
Right.
Or like, how did you navigate that? Because now you obviously they weren't doing it your way, right? They were doing it their way, and it worked. Like, I wanted to know how much he sprinkled in, and like, just because I'm thinking of Spytek, and he's coming from 2 different championships, 2 different championship organizations. Like, is he just going to try to recreate things, or is he going to like do it his way? And I thought what he said was fascinating.
No doubt. And, of course, a lot of coaches come from the Patriot tree. We know that, Raider Nation, right? We've seen it. Josh McDaniels did not work. Many coaches go from the Patriot tree and do not work. Some of the GM, right, exactly. Some of the GMs, though, no, you don't have to keep going on.
Patricia.
There's a lot of them, brother. There's a lot of them out there. But the GMs, they are pretty successful, and Thomas Dimitroff was definitely one of them. But we started off the conversation, and I was asking him a question about young and old. He had brought up young guys and old guys and kind of blended them together, and it led me right into the question about Pete Carroll and John Spytek and the opportunity that they have moving forward. forward. Funny you brought up the young and the older. Well, in Las Vegas, where we're at, covering the Raiders, you have Pete Carroll, the older, and you have John Spytek, the new GM. How do you see that blend going, and how does it go with what kind of in your mind?
I think it's really good. I'm glad that Pete obviously is 15 or 20 years younger than what he probably thinks.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of how I believe. I think that's a really good thing for someone to be like that. I think Spytek, he is a really good guy. He's very well respected. I'm talking about the people that are true football people in the league and the personnel world. Spytek, he's been on the edge of it, right? Close to it. I think those guys are going to work really well together. I think, John Snyder started his pairing, in Seattle with Pete. And he was, and right now, do they have who's given final football say? Is it? Did they even announce anything?
Brady? Not really. There was a senior vice president of football operations announced today.
Okay.
But Spytek's there. Brady has his thumbprint on it.
What am I saying? Yes.
Carroll, so yeah, your guess.
Well, I guess my point is I think they worked very well together. I mean, Pete's that kind of guy. He's upbeat. He's always about that, and I think that's a good mix. Back to Tom Brady being around there, what an important person to be involved with, right? And he knows what he's doing, and they have some good people there. This is an important time for them. I'm sure you guys believe that, right?
We know it's important. Ryan? They've got to get it right.
Yeah, and you said you became general manager at 40, right? Switching from one of the most storied franchises and most successful franchises in the NFL, from the Patriots to the Falcons. Walk me through what Spytek's kind of thinking of. Obviously, he was under Jason Light, who's one of the best GMs, if not the best GM in the league, right? Is he trying to recreate what Tampa has done the past 5 years since they have had so much success with the Super Bowl, or is he kind of reshaping it in his vision? Like, what was your mindset going in as a 40-year-old coming off two Super Bowl championships?
Well, it's a great question. I think having been around Bill Belichick, I brought all of what I thought was closer to being me, and then I jettisoned some of the stuff that I knew just wasn't me. Not because I'm not being scrutinizing of Bill, but there were certain things. That, by the way, a little aside, how many people that they've said, well, how many coaches left Bill's tree and didn't work because they tried to be Bill, right? And I think to that point, I think a smart person, and coaches are a little different. I mean, you think of Jason Light. He came from New England. I came from New England. John Robinson came from New England. The general managers had different success than a lot of the head coaches that came from there. The head coaches were so enthralled and immersed in Bill day to day that they thought that's exactly how I should be. And I think there's only one Bill Belichick. I don't mean to take this that way. To get back to your point, I think Spytek comes in. He's been around some really good football people. Back to Jason Light, right?
Yeah.
He's been around even directly and indirectly around Tom Brady. He's a very good football guy. Didn't he go? He went to Michigan too, right?
Yeah.
He played.
He played with.
He played
Brady?
for a quick minute.
Right? Yeah. So I just think a guy like that's going to come in to answer your question. Ultimately, you're going to come in. You're going to have a really good view of how you want to do things. You want to make sure that you are simpatico with your head coach, right? You can't come in with a disjointed, team plan. You have to have, like, if your mantra is, or whatever you're feeling about your team, big, strong, fast, explosive, athletic, whatever that may be, that has to be in line with your head coach, of course. So he comes in with, if that's in line, which I'm sure it is at this point, that person is going to be the guy that's going to go and look at free agency, how it compares to the draft, take all those positions and start building what needs to be done. There's a lot of work to be done there, right? I don't know, you guys. When you guys assess that team, like holes in the roster, there's a lot of work to be done, right? Where Spytek comes in, and I'm sure he probably comes in thinking, as soon as I can, I need to turn around the credibility of this organization. That's what we did in Atlanta. At least that was my approach, saying, okay, we're not going to hit this all out of the park in year one. We went from a 4-win team that first year in Atlanta to 11. We were very fortunate, and I think we switched. The biggest thing is we were working to switch the credibility and the respect. We want coaches to want to come in there and coach, and we want management. But most important, we want players that want to play for it. So that takes a guy like Spytek to come in and clean up a lot of the other areas, along with building the football team. It's a long answer to it's much more than just getting this ideal player and that ideal player. There's a lot to turning that around. You want people to respect. Right now, I mean, isn't it tough to hear the Raiders are kind of like, the Raiders. Like,
right.
It should be. It has the makings to be such an impressive franchise, I think.
There's no doubt. And when you talk about the credibility, and I love it, turning the credibility around, they just committed a 6-year contract to Chip Kelly to be the OC, or $6 million a year, I should say.
Was
contract.
It that high?
Yes.
Whoa.
I mean, and so I was telling Ryan, now that's a commitment, right? So that's telling me that they believe what's going on with Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, Tom Brady, John Spytek. They're going to let this thing play out because you don't just give $6 million to an OC. If you might blow this thing up in a year or two.
There's no question. That's great to hear.
Yep.
I think that's a really good find there. Who's your D coordinator, by the way?
Patrick Graham. They re-signed him.
They did.
Remember, he went to interview with the Jaguars, and he came back.
I think that's great.
But you talk about being in lockstep, the head coach and general manager. And last year, right, we did it the opposite way. We named the head coach, and then we brought the general manager in Telesco. Yeah. And so it's hard to be in lockstep when it goes in that order, right? Yeah. So if Telesco has a vision of this is how I want to do it, and Antonio Pierce has a vision of, hey, here's who we need to draft, and Telesco's like, wait a minute, like that can't work, right? And that's why a one-year marriage ends in divorce.
Yeah,
right.
That's complicated. I always wondered how that played out, especially that Tom was down the street and he came up. That was happening quite quickly, right?
Yeah,
the way they did it.
It happened really quickly.
But again, I keep coming back to Tom being there, Brady, ultimately, and having a sound football mind, of course, driven beyond. I think that's going to be a difference maker for Mark Davis and co.
Former GM Thomas Dimitroff here with us on Raider Nation Radio 920. Unnecessary Roughness. We're here on Media Row. No longer Radio Row. It's Media Row. There's all kind of media outlets here. So the big question as you look at the roster, the Raiders have 29 free agents. So if you need to turn it around, you can, right? Because there are 29 free agents. But it's always going to come back to the quarterback. There's 2 at the top of the draft that everyone's looking at, and then everyone's saying the draft is kind of not one of those quarterback drafts. If you're the GM, how do you go about getting your franchise guy if you feel like you need that guy?
It's a tough situation this year. This group is not the same group as last year, right? You don't have in my mind. I'm not saying the Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders don't have talent,
right?
I'm sorry. Remind me, what's the pick that you
6?
You guys are 6, right? Yep. Jets are 7. Is that right?
Jets are 7.
That's where it was.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be interesting to see who is the third is where you guys have to be thinking about, right? In my mind, because that's a hard discussion right now.
Right.
I mean, people are talking Jackson Dart. Right. Well, I mean. And could you see taking a 5'10" and a half quarterback from Oregon?
Right.
That's a
Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah,
that's Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my point is, who is at number 3? Because are 1 and 2 going to be taken?
Right. Yeah.
And believe me, I still think there's a lot of work to be done on 1 and 2 to try to determine who that is and what order. But also, I don't think this is one of those where Tennessee Titans right now are sitting there going, "No, we're taking Cam Ward out the gate. No, we're not even looking back." I still think there's a lot of work to be done to figure out how both of these guys are at 1 and 2, wherever they are. And Shedeur, which is another question, right? We all love Dion at so many levels, but you have to be the organization that can handle the pomp and circumstance over it all, right? Because that's going to be there, I would imagine. I don't see that necessarily.
Shedeur in Vegas, what could go wrong?
Myles Garrett came out publicly yesterday and requested a trade. Obviously, from a GM mindset, right? If you're Cleveland and you're the GM there, how do you move forward? Is it irreparable in your mind? And if so, are you actively reaching out to others or letting people come to you thinking that you're going to stonewall it and wait for the best draft pick possible?
Wow, that's a great question. I think, Ryan, that's one of those things where, first of all, your initial when you hear that, you're like, all right, go. Like that competitive, you don't want to be here, fine. Then you pull back and you're like, okay, how can I clean this up? We try to clean it up, and then you realize it feels like I don't know how they clean it up. So then you step back after a while and you sit down and you're like, all right, let me think, what are the repercussions here? I mean, the exciting side is there's a lot of potential booty coming your way, draft booty, whatever it is, and there's freeing up cap space, et cetera, et cetera. This is a tough thing for that organization. I'm a big fan. I like Andrew Berry. He's smart. He's on top of it.
Yeah.
I like Kevin Stefanski. I just saw him coming back from the Senior Bowl. I'm like, these guys are really good people.
Dudes,
but they've had a lot around them, right? A lot of distractions from Deshaun, everything that's going on. This is a really complicated situation to be. And the other thing is you get into that mindset of people were saying okay, let's try to get a top 5-7 pick out of this, like a team that's high that really needs, whatever needs this.
Yeah.
Problem is you might be getting 28, 29, 30 that is going to be dealing with that, meaning that's the team. You can say all you want to say. I'm sure in the back of Andrew Berry's mind is if I'm going forward with this, I need a partner. I need a partner in the first round that's going to do this. So, I would love not to be at 28 or 29, but deep down you're like, I really just need to check this box and get out of this, because this is not easy. I was never put in that position like that. We had some guys that would want to leave, and it's a lot easier when it's not one of the marquee players in the last, I don't know how many years we've been talking about.
Right.
This guy is on top of it. And you have to determine, of course, how much does he have left in the tank? Where is he that way? That's up to your staff to really determine that. But, we're talking to different teams around here. I mean, who goes out there and acquires a guy like that? Does Dan Quinn do it over in Washington because they already have a quarterback? Because this is going to be, you guys know this is going to be 2 1s, I would imagine, and maybe a 3.
Right.
So if you're a team that needs a quarterback, this is all I'd say in the end, if just back to the Raiders. If you're a team that needs a quarterback, to trade 2 1s away, man, and you don't have a quarterback.
Right.
Ooh.
That was my thing. We were talking about, I was like, man, it would be great to see him across from Max Crosby. That'd be fantastic.
Right.
But then Ryan Hogue's going to have to go out there and throw the ball, right? I mean, you don't have too many options at that point. So that was my thing, is it would be nice, but it's more of a pipe dream in that situation. But I can see like a Buffalo making a move like that, or even – some team that has to face the Chiefs all the time in the playoffs, or whatever team could get
Detroit,
it done. Yeah, Detroit would.
I thought Detroit, and I was one, by the way. I don't know if you guys saw my public comments, and the Raiders, like, I thought Max would be ideal at Detroit when all that went down, and for many reasons.
See, you started that stuff. We had to deal with that, Thomas. We had to deal with that.
I don't even know if I started it, but I jumped on board, and because I just thought they were in a spot. But,
it made sense. Yeah. So there was former NFL GM Thomas Dimitroff with myself and Ryan on Media Row here in the Convention Center in New Orleans. And, again, I just thought that he had some really good things to say about the Raiders and the opportunity and, what they need to do. And it kind of always goes back to got to find a quarterback, right? And even the Myles Garrett conversation that we had, not really a possibility because, well, the Raiders don't have a quarterback. So they need to get their quarterback before they can get a luxury like go after another edge rusher to pair with Max.
Unless you're going to win every game 3-0.
Right.
Yeah, you got to solve the Rubik's Cube that is quarterback. But as Rich Gannon talked about today, I mean, there's 10 teams in the league of 32 that really feel good, like, hey, we got our guy.
Right.
And then there's another 10 that are just like, I think we got our guy, and we'll see. Mm-hmm. And then there's 12 teams that are like where we are, or we're just, and there's not a lot of options, right? I mean, who's to say, like, the number 2 quarterback for the Denver Broncos, right, is Zach
Wilson.
Zach Wilson. Like, would he be higher rated, like, as he is right now?
Right.
He'd be higher rated than both the quarterbacks coming out. I really believe that. I mean, he went number 2
he did
years,
go number
and now
2.
He's played in the pros for 4 years, right?
Yeah,
so
you're right.
He's got to be better than what he was coming out.
He was rough.
I didn't think
he was good coming out of BYU. I thought I was like, that's a reach, but you know.
So, I mean, those are the kinds of things. Like, there's no surefire thing, and not that Caleb Williams is a surefire thing or Jaden Daniels, but it's such a crapshoot. And the quarterback position in particular, moving from college to pros, wide receiver, also such a hard position to just pick up and be the guy, because once you're drafted that high as a quarterback, the expectations are unrealistic, full stop. Like, you have an expectation to turn a franchise around and be great from day one. And if you don't have the talent around you, it doesn't matter how good you are.
Right.
But even if you do have the talent around you, to understand, like, that step up is so gigantic. That, I mean, you have one bad game, and now everybody's telling you how bad you are, and it's the first time, Q, in your life, right? Because all these guys, if you're number 1 draft pick, it's the first.
Oh, they've been praising you your whole life.
You've been praised the entire time, or if you made like one mistake in practice, hey, you got the next one.
Right. Or if you had a bad game, it was your teammates that made you have the bad game.
It wasn't your fault. You're the Heisman hopeful, like, whatever.
Right.
But I tell you what, you end up in all it takes is that first media question to just open up that floodgate of negativity, and then you start reading the trolls online, and now you start self-doubting, or you start responding. Not that you would ever do that on Twitter.
Never.
To the haters, right? But it's easy. I mean, even as grown and mature as you are, it is so hard to just be like, you know what? I got to say something.
Right.
I got to say something.
Oh, I know. Believe me, I
and
can't help myself.
And that impacts you, and then you're just like, what?
It does.
And if you're a 22-year-old impressionable, like,
right.
all you want to say is double middle finger, and you're like, I
Exactly.
can't do that, so I might as well just argue with them, and then you start getting in your head, and now they've already won.
And that's how Q wastes 2 hours of his life on Twitter and can't get away. Can't get that time back, is going down that rabbit hole that Ryan just pointed out. Well, the other thing, and we'll close out with this, is, if you're John Spytek and you're trying to decide if Cam Ward's your guy, Shedeur Sanders is your guy, or do you need to trade up to go get your guy, you're going to be married to this guy if you make the decision to pull the trigger on that quarterback. And if it doesn't work out, I know he's got a 5-year deal, but you're still going to be married to that. And the only guy who really got away with making a bad mistake, when he made a move for a quarterback was John Lynch. And that's only because Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, came through like the first of the month.
They drafted 2 that year, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't it a first and a 7th?
Yeah.
Right. So,
exactly.
But
they traded up. Remember, they traded up for Trey Lance.
They
gave up everything. Right. You can't.
It got masked by. No, you can't. You're
right.
attached at the hip at that decision, and you can't be wrong on it. And if you are, you'll end up being a one and done like Telesco.
Right. There's no doubt. And even if you don't get him to play the first year, once he finally does play, or play consistently, like Trey Lance looked like he was going to have a chance to do, but then he got injured and never really got out there. They had to move on from him. But again, if it wasn't for Brock Purdy, John Lynch wouldn't be there with the 49ers right now. He would not be there. Kyle Shanahan, probably. John Lynch, no. He would have been out because he made the move. So if you're John Spytek, that's something that if you got to make a move, if you feel like it. I've been talking about Shedeur. People have been talking about Cam Ward. If you're not sold on either one of those, it might be better to not make that move and just
take
sit
a
there.
Flyer and see what we got next year, or find a Mariota for a couple years or whatever.
If you get a guy in the 4th round, he doesn't work out, that's a lot better than you trade up to number 2 or whatever, and that guy doesn't work out, because that's a big black eye on your resume, and you can't afford that. Well, that's just day 2 in the books, right? I know we're officially on to Wednesday, but it's just day 2 in the books. We've got all week long. We're going to be doing this right here from Media Row, I should say. It's been a lot of fun. We're going to continue rolling on. I feel like it's day 22, but this is how we get down. So we'll be back tomorrow, Raider Nation. We've got a lot coming up. Trust and believe that. We'll have a lot of different representation from the Raiders. They're going to make their appearance here on Media Row later on today. Or later on Wednesday, I should say. So we look forward to that, and we'll bring you whatever we get to the podcast coming up for Thursday's show. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.
Go Raiders.